Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that I think we've all thought about at one point or another, and that is the hidden costs of social expectations
Ooh,
and
yes.
how they can kind of mess with our happiness and how they can kind of lead us down paths that we don't necessarily want to go down.
Yeah.
The inspiration for this deep dive is an episode of the Sweat Talk podcast. It's called "The Hidden Cost of Social Expectations," and the host is a guy named Chad. And I think you'll agree he makes some really insightful points.
I totally agree.
So let's start unpacking this. Um, Chad, right off the bat, argues that sometimes when we feel let down, it's not actually the other person's fault. It's our expectations that are causing the problem. What do you think about that?
It's so interesting, right? Because we often don't realize how much power we're giving to other people to kind of dictate our emotions when we place these huge expectations on them. It's like we're creating this mental script of how they should behave. And when reality deviates from that script, we get disappointed.
Yeah, it's almost like we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Exactly. And the thing is, this all starts really early. Chad talked about how, when he was in high school, he saw his friends change themselves to try and fit their girlfriend's expectations, only for the relationship to, ultimately
Oh,
fail.
yeah, it's like the classic tale of trying to fit into a mold that isn't meant for you.
Mm.
But, I mean, isn't there some level of expectation that's healthy in any relationship?
Well, of course, healthy relationships definitely thrive on communication and understanding each other's needs. But the problem comes in when we are imposing expectations that are based on societal norms or these external pressures instead of genuine open communication with our partners.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does this teenage relationship dynamic, how does that play out in adulthood?
Well, there's research that suggests that societal expectations, they actually can really influence our partner choices and our relationship dynamics, even as
Hmm?
adults. We might unconsciously seek out partners who fulfill, these certain societal ideals or even try to mold our current partners into those ideals. And that can definitely lead to tension and dissatisfaction for sure.
I've never thought about it like that. That's really interesting. Chad also brings up something that I think a lot of us can relate to, and that's the pressure to hit all these milestones like graduation, stable career, marriage, kids, all by a certain age. Like we're all supposed to follow the same script.
Oh, absolutely.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think if we kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture here,
Hmm.
this pressure really stems from these deeply ingrained societal norms.
Hmm.
And they kind of dictate, what a successful life should look like.
Right.
But the reality is that everyone's path is unique.
Mm.
And comparing ourselves to this rigid timeline, it just leads to feelings of inadequacy and, this sense that we're somehow failing.
Yeah, it's like you're constantly being measured against this external yardstick, regardless of what truly matters to you.
Exactly, exactly. And then you layer on top of that the whole social media effect, which Chad illustrated with a pretty wild story about people renting private jets just for photo shoots.
Yeah, the infamous $80 jet. It's crazy. What do you make of that? Is it just harmless fun, or is there something deeper going on?
I mean, on the surface, it might seem harmless, just a bit of fun, but I think it highlights a much deeper issue, and that's just this pervasive nature of social comparison in the digital age, right? We're
Right.
constantly being bombarded with these carefully curated images that, that project this often unattainable version of reality.
So it's not even just about showing off. It's about keeping up appearances and projecting this image of success, even if it's completely fabricated.
Absolutely. And social media can really distort our perceptions of success and happiness, which just fuels those feelings of inadequacy and anxiety, right? I
Oh,
mean, it really taps into this inherent human desire for belonging and
yeah.
connection. But it makes us constantly compare ourselves to these idealized versions of others.
Right.
And that's where the problem lies.
It makes me think about the psychology behind all this. Like, how does this constant comparing ourselves to others on social media, how does it actually affect us?
Well, from a psychological perspective, this constant exposure to these, perfect lives, it can trigger something called the hedonic treadmill,
Hmm.
which basically means that we strive for more, we achieve it,
Yeah.
but then our happiness levels adapt and we're left wanting more again. So it's this never-ending cycle of desire and dissatisfaction.
So it's like it doesn't matter how much you achieve or how much you acquire. it never really feels like enough because you're always chasing after that next thing.
Yeah, exactly. And this constant comparison can lead to feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and even depression.
Mm.
It's really crucial to recognize the impact of social media on our mental well-being and to cultivate a more mindful approach to its use. Really be intentional about how you're using it and what you're consuming.
That's such a good point. So knowing how social media can manipulate our perceptions and stuff,
Mm,
it makes it even more important to shift our focus inward,
right.
right? Chad talks about moving from why am I not there yet to am I living authentically?
Yes. That is such a crucial mindset shift.
Yeah.
And it's all about recognizing that true fulfillment, it comes from aligning your life with your own values and goals, not somebody else's predetermined script.
Well, it's a big shift, though.
Yeah.
How do we actually make that shift? I mean, it sounds easy in theory, but I imagine it's pretty tough in practice.
Well, it definitely takes effort. It starts with self-awareness and introspection.
Hmm.
It's about asking yourself those tough questions, like what truly matters to you? What brings you joy and a sense of purpose? What makes you feel truly alive?
So it's less about like following somebody else's map and more about like,
Mhm.
figuring out your own internal compass and following your own North Star.
Exactly, exactly. It's about defining success on your own terms and living a life that feels true to yourself.
But what about the disappointment that comes when things don't go according to plan? Like, how do we deal with that?
Well, Chad argues that letting go of expectations, like really letting go of them, is key to releasing resentment and disappointment.
That's a good point. It seems like a tall order, though, right? Like letting go of expectations. I mean, especially when we've been conditioned our whole lives to strive for certain things. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right. It definitely doesn't happen overnight. It takes a conscious effort to really shift our perspective and cultivate this more flexible mindset. But I think the first step is recognizing that we can't control everything, including other people's actions and choices.
That makes sense. If we're always trying to control things outside of our control, we're going to end up frustrated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to control everything and everyone around you, focus on what you can control, your own thoughts, actions, and reactions. When you shift your focus inward like that, you empower yourself to navigate life's challenges with more grace and resilience.
That's a good reminder. So
Oh.
so instead of clinging to these rigid expectations, we
Mm.
can approach life with a more open and accepting attitude.
Exactly. And by letting go of those unrealistic expectations, we actually create space for genuine connection, for personal growth, and ultimately for more fulfilling relationships.
Hmm. This is all really great food for thought. But before we get too deep into solutions and stuff, I want to circle back to another one of Chad's points that really struck a chord with me. And that's this idea that society often equates our worth with our possessions.
Yes.
Like what we own is somehow a reflection of our value as people.
Oh, it's so true. There's this pervasive message out there that material possessions equal success and happiness.
Hmm.
And we're constantly bombarded with advertising and media that reinforce this idea, which just creates this culture of consumerism.
Yeah, you're so right. It's like we're constantly being sold this idea that the more stuff we have, the happier we'll be. But is that really true?
Well, the research actually suggests that material possessions, they only provide a temporary boost to happiness. Like the novelty wears off pretty quickly. And then we're just left wanting more, right? It's what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill.
So it's like we're on this constant chase for
Yeah.
that next shiny object,
Mhm.
but it never truly satisfies us.
Exactly. True fulfillment comes from aligning our lives with our values
Hmm.
and purpose. It's
Hmm.
not about accumulating things. It's about living a life that's meaningful.
So instead of chasing fleeting happiness through possessions, we should be focusing on, experiences and relationships and things that really align with our
Yeah,
values.
absolutely. It's about finding joy in the simple things, cultivating gratitude for what you have, and pursuing passions that give your life meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like true happiness is an inside job, right? It's not something that we can just buy or acquire.
You got it. It's about cultivating that sense of inner peace and fulfillment that comes from living a life that's true to yourself, regardless of what society might dictate.
Oh, so much to unpack here.
Yeah.
Um, Chad ends his episode with a call to action, asking listeners to comment truth as a way to like reprogram their thinking, kind of break free from those societal scripts that we were talking about. What do you make of that?
I think it's a powerful way to symbolize choosing authenticity over conformity.
Mhm.
It's about consciously rejecting those narratives that tell us who we should be and what we should value.
Mm.
It's about reclaiming our own power and choosing to live a life that's aligned with our own unique definition of truth.
So it's like saying yes to ourselves and no to those expectations that no longer serve us.
That act. Exactly.
This has been an incredible conversation so far.
It really has.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to turn to you, the listener, and ask what stands out to you the most from what we've discussed so far.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
What resonates with your own experiences? We'll be back in a moment to delve a little bit deeper into Chad's insights and explore some practical strategies for breaking free from the grip of societal expectations.
Yes, can't wait.
Welcome back. We've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff here, about the hidden costs of social expectations and how they can really kind of lead us down a path that doesn't really feel like ours.
It's so true. And the thing is, these expectations are often so deeply ingrained in our culture that we don't even realize how much they're influencing our choices.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're just kind of on autopilot, following this pre-programmed script that society has handed us.
Right. And one of the most insidious aspects of this, I think, is the link between societal expectations and materialism.
Oh, absolutely. Chad really nailed this point in the podcast. He argued that society constantly tells us that our worth is tied to what we own.
Right.
Like our possessions are somehow a reflection of our value as people.
And that's such a dangerous message because it sets us up for this never-ending cycle of wanting more. It just feeds this belief that happiness can be bought. If I just get this thing or that thing, then I'll finally be happy.
Right.
But as we were talking about before the break, the research actually shows the opposite, right? Like material possessions only provide a very temporary boost to our happiness level.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, money can't buy happiness.
Right.
And yet we're bombarded with messages that tell us otherwise.
Yeah.
So if material possessions aren't the key to happiness, what is? Like what does a fulfilling life actually look like?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think the answer lies in aligning your life with your values and purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? I mean, it sounds kind of abstract.
Yeah, well, it starts with identifying what truly matters to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are your core values? What are your passions? What kind of impact do you want to make on the world? What legacy do you want to leave behind?
So it's about introspection, like really kind of digging deep and figuring out what makes you tick.
Exactly. And once you have a better understanding of your own internal compass, you can start making choices that are aligned with it, right?
Right.
You're not going to get everything right, but you at least have a better sense of direction.
Mm. This reminds me of something Chad said in the podcast. He encouraged his listeners to shift their focus from why am I not there yet to am I living authentically?
Ooh, that's such a powerful reframing, isn't it? It's about moving away from external validation and focusing on internal alignment.
Yeah. It's like choosing to write your own script rather than following the one that society has given you.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly liberating, to realize that you have that choice.
But it's probably not easy, is it? Like, I imagine there's a lot of fear and uncertainty that comes with breaking free from those societal expectations.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of courage to challenge the status quo and choose a path that might not be conventional. People might question you, they might judge you, they might not understand.
Yeah.
But it's so worth it.
So what advice would you give to someone who's struggling to break free from those societal scripts?
Well, first and foremost, be kind to yourself. This is a process. It's not a destination. You're not going to wake up one day and be completely free from all societal expectations.
Right.
It's an ongoing journey, and there will be moments of doubt. There will be moments of uncertainty, and that's okay. That's all part of the process.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of freedom from expectations. It's more about just being aware of those expectations and making conscious choices that feel right for you.
You got it. It's about finding that balance between honoring your own needs and navigating the expectations of the world around you.
That makes a lot of sense. So where do we go from here? Like what are some practical steps we can take to start living more authentically?
Well, I think one thing you can do is start by identifying the areas of your life where you feel the most pressure to conform to societal expectations.
Okay, so like career choices, relationships, maybe even, how you spend your free time.
Exactly. And once you've identified those areas, you can start to question the underlying beliefs and expectations that are driving your choices in those areas. Are those beliefs truly your own, or are they something that you've internalized from society? And if you find that those beliefs are no longer serving you, you can start to challenge them and create new ones that are more aligned with your values and aspirations.
So it's about rewriting those internal scripts, those narratives that we've been carrying around for so long.
Exactly. And it's about giving yourself permission to define success and happiness on your own terms.
That's a powerful concept.
Hmm.
Like giving yourself permission to live a life that feels authentically yours. It's a little daunting though.
I understand that. It can feel overwhelming at first, like, where do I even begin? But remember, you don't have to do it all at once.
Right, small steps.
Yeah.
What are some baby steps, some baby steps we can take to start moving in the right direction?
Well, one thing you can do is start practicing mindfulness. Really pay attention to your thoughts and feelings throughout the day. And when you notice yourself, feeling pressured to conform to societal expectations, take a moment to pause and ask yourself,
Okay, wait, this is good. I'm taking notes here.
go for it. Ask yourself, is this something that I truly want, or am I doing it because I feel like I should?
Yeah. It's a simple question, but it's so profound because it really forces you to kind of check in with yourself and see if you're living in alignment with your own values.
Exactly. And over time, as you become more aware of those moments, you can start making different choices.
Mm.
Choices that feel more authentic, more aligned with your true self.
Choices that come from a place of internal motivation rather than external pressure.
Exactly. And those choices might not always be easy, but they will ultimately lead you to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about choosing courage over comfort, choosing authenticity over conformity.
Yes. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. So many people are grappling with these same questions about societal expectations and the pressure to conform. You're not the only one who feels this way.
It's reassuring to know that we're all in this together. We're all kind of figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, right? There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's about finding what works for you and creating a life that feels truly authentic.
And Chad's call to action at the end of his podcast really, really resonated with me. He asked his listeners to comment truth as a way to, kind of reclaim their own power and reject those societal scripts.
It's such a powerful symbol, isn't it? It's about consciously choosing to live a life that's aligned with your own definition of truth.
Yeah, it's about saying yes to yourself and no to the expectations that no longer serve you.
And it's a reminder that we have the power to create our own reality, a reality that's grounded in authenticity and self-love.
This has been such an insightful conversation, and I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that true happiness and fulfillment come from within. It's
Yeah.
not something we can find in material possessions or external validation. It's about aligning our lives with our values and purpose and having the courage to live authentically.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that struck me most about Chad's podcast was the way he talked about the pressure to conform to society's timeline.
Oh, right, right. That whole graduate, get a job, get married, have kids
Yeah.
script that we're all kind of expected to follow.
Right. It can be so suffocating.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, what would happen if we suddenly lifted those societal expectations? What if we gave ourselves permission to write our own timelines?
Oh, that's a good one. What if we weren't bound by these arbitrary deadlines and expectations?
Imagine the possibilities. We could pursue our passions without feeling rushed. We could explore different paths without fear of judgment. We could create a life that truly reflects our unique values and aspirations.
That's such a liberating thought. It's like opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
Exactly. And while it's not always easy to break free from those societal expectations, I think it's worth striving for.
Because ultimately, the only person you need to answer to is yourself.
And the only timeline that truly matters is the one that feels right for you.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about. But before we wrap up, let's turn it over to you, our listener.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
If societal expectations were suddenly lifted, what would you truly pursue? What dreams would you chase? What passions would you ignite?
Take a moment to really envision what your life could look like if you were free to write your own script.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what if we could just hit the reset button on all those expectations?
Like, what would we do if we were truly free to be ourselves, without all those shoulds and shouldn'ts weighing us down?
And I think that's what this whole deep dive has been about, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's about rediscovering that sense of agency
Hmm.
and realizing that we actually have the power to create a life that feels, that feels authentic and meaningful to us.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that true happiness doesn't come from trying to fit into some predetermined mold. It comes from embracing our individuality and living a life that's true to who we are at our core.
And that might mean making choices that go against the grain,
Hmm.
that challenge the status quo.
It might mean taking risks, stepping outside of our comfort zones
Yeah.
and pursuing passions that might seem unconventional to other people.
But ultimately, it's about living a life that feels right for you,
Yeah.
regardless of what anyone else might think or say.
And that's where true freedom lies, I think.
I think so too. So, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you to hold on to that question,
Yeah.
that question of what would you truly pursue if those societal expectations were suddenly lifted?
Let it simmer in your mind.
Mhm.
Let it spark your imagination and let it guide you as you continue to navigate your own unique journey.
Because the truth is, you do have the power to create a life that's filled with purpose and passion and joy.
A life that's truly your own.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration.
Yes, thank you.
And until next time, keep diving deep.